The notification illuminated my phone's screen at precisely 3:17 p.m. on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. It was a forwarded email confirmation from Paradise Cruise Lines, a message clearly not meant for my eyes, but which had been carelessly shared with our interconnected family cloud account. The details were stark and wounding: a luxury suite, a premium champagne package, and a couple's massage, all meticulously booked under my husband Gideon's name for the exact week of his supposedly crucial business summit in Seattle. Except, another name was listed on the reservation, a name that felt like a splinter under my skin: Mari's. My hand, holding my afternoon coffee, did not tremble. The cup did not clatter against its saucer. Instead, something cold and heavy solidified in the pit of my stomach. 15 years of marriage, of shared dreams and quiet compromises, were suddenly encapsulated with an exquisite and awful clarity. I found myself scrolling through the itinerary with a strange, clinical detachment. A 5-day Caribbean cruise, an ocean view balcony room, a reservation for the captain's table dinner, all the romantic clichés you would expect from a man who, just last month, couldn't recall which flowers I had pointed out for our anniversary. "Working late again tonight," he had texted me less than an hour ago. "Don't wait up for me." I studied the cruise itinerary again, my eyes lingering on the specific details. Cabin number 1243, deck 10, starboard side. Seeing those concrete particulars made the betrayal feel irrevocably real. This was far more than a simple, sordid affair. This was calculated planning, a meticulous construction of a parallel life while I was dutifully maintaining the one we were supposed to share. What an absolute fool I had been. I remember standing up and walking into our shared bedroom closet as if in a trance. His tailored suits hung neatly beside my dresses, a silent testament to a partnership that now felt like a fraud. His polished shoes were aligned perfectly with mine. The physical proximity of our belongings, once a comfort, suddenly felt repulsive. Just as I was about to start tearing his expensive garments from their hangers, to rip the fabric and obliterate the memories woven into them, my phone chimed again. Another notification from the family cloud. This time, a photograph appeared. A young, blonde woman with unnervingly perfect teeth was posing in front of a mirror, clad in expensive lingerie with the price tags still dangling conspicuously. The caption beneath it read, "Can't wait for you to take this off me on our trip." Counting down the days, I recognized her immediately. It was Mari's, the new director of client relations at Gideon's company, the same woman he had insisted on inviting to our Christmas party last December. The same woman who had looked me in the eye with an expression of feigned sympathy while accepting a glass of wine in my own home. What stopped me from destroying his possessions was not a sudden wave of restraint. It was a random memory surfacing from the depths of my mind. A conversation I had partially overheard at a charity banquet 3 months prior. Mari's, openly and loudly discussing her recent engagement to a tech entrepreneur, flashing a garish diamond ring, and boasting about her upcoming June wedding. I sat down on the edge of our bed, the phone still clutched in my hand, and did something I had never felt the need to do before. I searched for her name on social media. Her profile was public, a curated feed of hashtags like blessed and future wife. And there he was, her fiancé, tagged in dozens of photographs. Cashin. He was handsome in that polished Silicon Valley way. His own profile was a monument to startup success stories and hollow motivational quotes. One of his recent posts caught my eye. Heading off on a solo trip to clear my head before all the wedding madness begins. Time to recharge and come back ready to start forever with my Maris. The dates of his solo trip coincided perfectly with the cruise. A peculiar, almost serene calm washed over me. The kind of calm that descends when the universe presents you with a piece of information so perfectly timed it feels like destiny. I opened my laptop, navigating to the Paradise Cruise Line's website, and pulled up the deck layouts and cabin availability. My credit card was already in my hand. 20 minutes later, I had my own confirmation email. I had booked a single cabin, number 1245, located directly adjacent to their little love nest. The symmetry of it was too beautifully poetic to ignore. I took a deep, steadying breath and did the only logical thing a woman in my position could do. I found Cashin's corporate email address on his company's website and composed a message. Mr. Cashin, I believe we have a matter of mutual importance to discuss regarding our respective partners and their upcoming Caribbean vacation. Would you be available for coffee tomorrow? It concerns your fiancé, Maris, and my husband, Gideon, who have made plans I believe you should be aware of. I have attached their booking confirmation for your review. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just sat there and waited, watching the small dots on my screen that indicated he was reading my message, typing, pausing, and then typing again. His reply came 3 minutes later. Where and when? The next morning, I was seated in a corner booth of an upscale downtown cafe, my gaze fixed on the door. I recognized him the moment he walked in, taller in person, with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding a room. His eyes met mine across the cafe, and in them, I saw it all. Recognition, dawning comprehension, and the unmistakable expression of someone whose world had just been shattered in the same way mine had. He sat down across from me. There were no handshakes, no formal introductions. Show me everything, he said, his voice quiet but firm. So I did. By the time our coffees had grown cold, we had forged an alliance, a partnership born from mutual betrayal. It was more than an alliance, it was a pact, a strategy session. They think they are so clever, I said, finally allowing myself a mirthless smile. They have no idea what is coming. Cashin's face, previously a mask of grief, hardened with determination. What exactly do you have in mind? He asked. I leaned forward, lowering my voice conspiratorially. I have already booked the cabin next to theirs, but one person watching their romantic getaway crumble is not nearly as satisfying as two, don't you think? He mirrored my lean, his own voice a low murmur. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting we both take that cruise. I'm suggesting we become very, very good friends who just so happen to be everywhere they are. I'm suggesting we make this the vacation they will never, ever forget for all the wrong reasons. For the first time since we had sat down, Cashin smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man envisioning sweet, methodical retribution. I'm in, he said, but we need to be smarter than them. We need a plan that doesn't just expose them, but completely dismantles whatever fantasy they have built for themselves. I nodded, a feeling akin to exhilaration bubbling up beneath the layers of my fury. By the time we dock back in Miami, I promised, they will wish they had never set foot on that ship. The week leading up to the cruise was an Academy Award-worthy performance on my part. I kissed Gideon goodbye as he packed his suitcase with his conference attire. I helped him choose a tie that would be appropriate for his keynote presentation. I even drove him to the airport, waving with a broad, genuine-looking smile from the departure's curb. "I'll miss you," he said, his gaze conveniently avoiding mine. "Oh, I am sure the time will fly by," I replied sweetly, thinking of the bikinis and evening gowns already packed in my own suitcase, which was safely stashed at Cashin's temporary residence. The moment his plane was airborne, a flight not to Seattle but to Miami, I drove directly to the port where Cashin was waiting for me. We had spent the past week coordinating, planning, and constructing a detailed backstory that would paint us as old college friends reuniting by pure coincidence. We had practiced our reactions for when we would inevitably bump into our cheating partners. We had memorized the ship's layout and booked identical shore excursions to the ones they had selected. "How are you feeling?" Cashin asked as we stood in the bustling cruise terminal, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. "I keep oscillating between wanting to burst into tears and wanting to push them both overboard," I confessed. He nodded grimly. "I have already looked up maritime law. Apparently, the latter is frowned upon." That unexpected sliver of dark humor made me laugh, a raw, rusty sound in my throat. It was the first time I had laughed in days. We boarded the ship separately, agreeing to meet later after we had settled into our cabins. I found mine easily, number 1245, positioned perfectly next to the room where my husband would soon be cozying up with his mistress. I pressed my ear against the connecting wall. Silence, for now. Their flight wasn't scheduled to land for another few hours. I unpacked slowly, hanging up the new clothes I had purchased specifically for this voyage. These were dresses Gideon had never seen. Dresses chosen to make a statement when the inevitable confrontation arrived. At 6:00 p.m., a text from Cashin came through. "They've boarded." Just saw them at check-in. They didn't see me. My heart hammered against my ribs. My palms grew slick with sweat. The moment was approaching faster than I had anticipated. Cashin and I met at a quiet bar 3 decks up, a location far enough away to avoid any premature encounters. He already had a martini waiting for me. "To the most twisted vacation either of us has ever taken," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his. "May we survive with our dignity intact, even if our marriages are not." "My marriage seems to have ended before it even began," he said, and I heard in his voice the same hollow ache that had taken up residence in my own chest for days. We then began to share our stories, piecing together the timelines of our respective relationships. Cashin had met Maurice at a tech conference 2 years ago. Their engagement had been a whirlwind. He admitted with a sigh of regret that there had been red flags, unexplained absences, suspicious phone calls, sudden business emergencies. "I ignored it all," he confessed, staring into his drink. "I wanted so desperately to believe I had found the one." 15 years, I replied, the number feeling heavy on my tongue. "I gave him 15 years. We talked about having children. We decided together to focus on our careers first." We had a timeline. Next year was supposed to be our year to start trying. My voice broke on the last few words, an unexpected crack in my composure. Cashin's expression softened with empathy. "I'm so sorry, Alina." "Don't be," I said, my voice hardening again. "Be angry, I am." We talked for hours, drinking just enough to numb the sharpest edges of our pain but not enough to cloud our judgment. We needed our wits about us. Around 10:00 p.m., we made our way to the main dining room for the welcome dinner. And there they were, seated at an intimate table for two by the windows. Gideon's hand was resting on the small of Mari's back as they perused the menu. The gesture was intimate, familiar, practiced. The sight of it hit me with more force than I had anticipated. This was not their first trip together. This was not new. The realization made my knees feel weak. Cashin steadied me with a hand on my elbow. "Not yet," he murmured. "Let them enjoy their little fantasy for one more night. Tomorrow we begin." We retreated to a different restaurant, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was a knot of acid and rage. "How long do you think this has been going on?" I asked, pushing pasta around my plate with a fork. "Does it really matter?" he replied. "A day, a month, a year, the betrayal is the same." "It matters to me," I insisted. "I need to know how much of my life has been a lie." Back in my cabin that night, I pressed my ear against the wall again. This time I could hear them. Muffled laughter, conversation, and the unmistakable squeak of the bed springs. I recorded it all, more evidence for the arsenal I was building. I barely slept. When dawn broke, Cashin and I met for breakfast on the Lido deck. We had discovered that our cheating partners had booked a snorkeling excursion for our first port of call. A small private island owned by the cruise line. "Are you ready for day one?" Cashin asked, pushing a cup of coffee toward me. "As ready as I will ever be." We took the tender boat to the island 30 minutes after Gideon and Mari's had departed. It was easy to spot them on the beach, sharing a single lounge chair, her head resting on his chest, his fingers lazily tracing patterns in her hair. Cashin and I set up our own chairs perfectly within their line of sight, but angled just enough so they wouldn't notice us immediately. We waited for the perfect moment of dawning, horrified recognition. It came when Gideon stood up to get drinks from the beachside bar. He turned, holding 2 frozen cocktails, and stopped dead in his tracks as he saw me. The drinks tilted in his hands, blue liquid sloshing over his fingers. I gave him a casual, nonchalant wave, as if we were bumping into each other in the produce aisle at the grocery store. His face went so pale so quickly that for a moment I thought he might faint. He just stood there, paralyzed, unable to move toward me or back to Mari's, who was still obliviously scrolling through her phone. I adjusted my new swimsuit, a daring red one I would never have chosen before, and marched directly toward him. "Gideon, what a coincidence!" I exclaimed, my voice loud enough for the nearby sunbathers to hear. "How lucky to run into you all the way out here. The weather is certainly different from how I imagine it is in Seattle." He opened and closed his mouth like a fish, but no words came out. Over his shoulder, I saw Mari's finally look up, a confused expression on her face that quickly morphed into one of pure dread as she saw Cashin approaching from behind me. "What? How?" Gideon finally managed to stammer. "Your lover should really be more careful about what she shares on the family cloud account," I said with a saccharine smile. "Oh, and you should meet my new friend, Cashin. I believe he already knows your companion." I turned my gaze to Mari's, whose face had taken on the color of sour milk. "That engagement ring looks so lovely in the sunlight. Does your fiancé know you're engaged to him? Or is that just a minor detail you forgot to mention while planning this romantic little getaway?" People were staring openly now, watching the drama unfold on the pristine white sand. "This is not what it looks like," Gideon finally said, resorting to the most hackneyed cliché imaginable. "Really?" I asked, gesturing to the 2 spilled blue drinks, to Mari's horrified expression, and then back at him. "Because it looks exactly like you are on a Caribbean cruise with your mistress while telling your wife you are at a business conference in Seattle." Cashin stepped forward then, addressing Mari's directly. "We have booked all the same shore excursions as you two." "Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? It seems we will be getting to spend lots of quality time together on this trip." And that was only the beginning. It was the first day of 5, the opening act of what would become the most excruciating vacation for 2 people who thought they had gotten away with the ultimate betrayal. I realized then that I had given this man everything. My youth, my trust, and my unwavering support through professional upheavals and family losses. I had been his rock, believing we were building something substantial together. And all the while, he had been building a separate life, one that had no place for me. I gave them one last, brilliant smile. "Enjoy your drinks. The cruise is just getting started." That night, Cashin and I reconvened in my cabin, dissecting the day's confrontation and fine-tuning our strategy for the days ahead. The initial shock had been satisfying, but it wasn't enough. Not for a betrayal this deep. "They're rattled," Cashin observed, pacing the small confines of my room. "I intercepted Mari's trying to change their dinner reservation and all their future shore excursions." I nodded, scrolling through the ship's app on my tablet. "They will not get very far. I have already befriended 3 key members of the crew who are keeping me updated on any changes they attempt to make." This was no longer a spontaneous reaction to heartbreak. In that week of planning, I had become methodical in ways I never knew I was capable of. What Gideon did not know was that before I left our home, I had photographed every piece of his relevant work paperwork. I had downloaded his complete text message history using our phone plan's backup service. I had called our bank and flagged major expenses from the past year, creating a clear financial timeline of his affair through hotel bills and extravagant gift purchases. What Mari's did not realize was that Cashin had been equally diligent, taking screenshots of suspicious texts, tracking her location history, and most damningly, documenting how she had been quietly diverting funds from their startup's investors to finance her lavish lifestyle. "Tomorrow is the formal dinner," I said, looking at the schedule. "They will be expecting us to make a big scene." Cashin stopped his pacing. "So we do the opposite." "Exactly," I smiled, a cold clarity settling over me. "We will be charming, friendly, even. We will ask to join their table. We will make polite conversation about the psychological toll of prolonged deception." Cashin nodded in appreciation. The anticipation of a confrontation is often far worse than the confrontation itself. I stood and went to my suitcase, pulling out a sealed envelope. "I have been saving this for the right moment. I think I know when to use it now." Inside were photographs, crystal-clear security camera stills from the ship, showing Gideon and Mari's on previous cruises. Each photo was date and time-stamped, confirming a pattern of deception that went back at least 18 months. The ship's head of security had been surprisingly sympathetic once I explained my situation, especially in exchange for a generous consulting fee. "How did you get these?" Cashin asked, his eyebrows raised in genuine surprise. "Let's just say when your husband boasts about always booking the same cruise line for his business trips, it tends to leave a very traceable pattern." I laid the photos out chronologically. 8 cruises in 18 months, always with her, always during what he claimed were vital conferences or client meetings. Cashin let out a low whistle. That is not an affair, that is a second relationship. Precisely. And tomorrow night I want them both to understand that we know everything. Not just about this cruise, about everything. We stayed up past midnight, choreographing every interaction and casual run-in for the days to come. We were no longer improvising. This was a meticulously planned campaign of psychological revenge. The next morning, we joined another shore excursion, this time a tour of some ancient ruins at our first port of call. Cashin and I arrived at the meeting point just as Gideon and Maurice were about to board the tour bus. The color drained from their faces when they saw us. I smiled cheerfully and took a seat directly behind them. "Good morning. Sleep well." Maurice stared straight ahead, her posture rigid with tension. Gideon managed a weak, pathetic smile. Look, Alina, maybe we can talk about this privately." "Oh, we will have plenty of time to talk," I assured him. "We have 3 more days together on this lovely ship." There is absolutely no rush. Throughout the tour, Cashin and I maintained a stream of polite, banal conversation, occasionally directing innocuous questions at our tormented companions. "Have you ever visited these ruins before? Isn't the architecture just fascinating?" Each normal interaction seemed to unnerve them more than a direct confrontation ever could. By the time we returned to the ship, they were visibly fraying at the edges, exchanging heated whispers, constantly looking over their shoulders, and jumping at every corner where they caught a glimpse of us. For the formal dinner that evening, I wore a black dress I had bought specifically for this occasion. It was elegant and understated, but with just enough of an edge to make a statement. Cashin wore a tailored suit that highlighted his athletic build. We made our entrance into the dining room intentionally, 15 minutes after Gideon and Maurice had been seated. "Do you mind if we join you?" I asked, already pulling out a chair at their table for 2. "The maitre d' mentioned you had some extra room." He couldn't refuse without causing a scene. Trapped by social etiquette, they shuffled uncomfortably as we settled in. "Wonderful evening, isn't it?" Cashin commented, unfolding his napkin with practiced grace. "Maurice, that dress looks familiar. Did you not wear that to the Henderson charity gala last month?" Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The Henderson Gala had been a work function where she had introduced Gideon as merely a colleague. "Yes, I believe so," she mumbled. I flagged down a passing waiter. "Champagne for the table, please. We are celebrating." Gideon's face clouded over. "What exactly are we celebrating?" I smiled as I reached into my clutch and retrieved the envelope of photographs. "Anniversaries, of course. Specifically the 18-month anniversary of your very first cruise together." I laid the photos out on the table one by one like dealing a hand of poker. The Caribbean in March of last year, the Mediterranean in May, Alaska in July. Each one taken during what you told me were essential business trips. The blood drained from his face. "How did you—" "I have always admired your consistency," I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the tremor in my heart. "Same cruise line, often the same cabin category. It made the tracking surprisingly simple." Mari's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. Cashin chose that moment to play his own card. "Speaking of consistency," he remarked, sliding a folder across the table toward Mari's. "I have been reviewing our company's financials. There is an interesting pattern of withdrawals that seems to coincide perfectly with the dates of these cruises." Her water glass froze halfway to her lips. "That is not, you cannot prove." Our investors were quite interested in the documentation, Cashin explained calmly. I had a fascinating conference call with them yesterday morning. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the dawning realization in their eyes that we were not just scorned partners lashing out in anger. We had been methodical, we had been patient, we had receipts both literally and figuratively. "What do you want, Alina?" Gideon finally asked, his voice barely a whisper above the dining room's ambient chatter. I leaned forward, holding his gaze. "For tonight, just dinner, pleasant conversation. Maybe you could tell Cashin about your conference schedule for the next few months. I am sure he would be very interested to learn which business trips are actually romantic getaways." They sat in stunned silence, trapped in the web of their own lies. As the server arrived with the champagne, I raised my glass. "To the truth, it always comes to the surface eventually, does it not?" Throughout the rest of the meal, we maintained a veneer of pleasant conversation, occasionally dropping little nuggets of information that proved just how deeply we had investigated their affair. Each revelation was like a precise incision, a small wound that added to the cumulative damage. By the time dessert arrived, they both looked physically ill. When we finally stood to leave, I placed a spare room key card on the table. "For your convenience," I explained, "it is for the cabin adjacent to yours. We have been taking turns listening through the wall." The soundproofing is surprisingly poor. The look on Gideon's face as he realized that even their most intimate moments had been compromised was a memory I would cherish. As Cashin and I walked away, he murmured, "That was masterful. But that is just the beginning, isn't it?" I nodded, not with joy, but with a cold, hard sense of satisfaction. Tonight was about showing them we know everything. Tomorrow is about showing them what that knowledge is going to cost them. Back in my cabin, I finally allowed the grief to hit me. Not for the man Gideon was, but for the life I thought I had. 15 years of my life gone, trust shattered, hopes for a future incinerated. But in its place, something new and unexpected was taking root, a sense of my own power. I had been blindsided by betrayal, yes, but I had responded not with helpless despair, but with calculated action. Before I went to bed, I sent Cashin one last text. "Thank you for today. Tomorrow, no mercy." His response was immediate. "They created this storm. We are just making sure they stand in the rain." I fell asleep to the sound of a muffled, bitter argument coming through the wall. A lullaby of justice in the making. The third day of the cruise dawned bright and clear, the weather a perfect, ironic backdrop for what Cashin and I had planned. While Gideon and Maurice had likely spent the night arguing, we had been finalizing the arrangements with the small army of crew members and fellow passengers we had quietly recruited to our cause. Our first move was at breakfast. We spotted them huddled at a corner table, slumped over their coffee, looking exhausted and paranoid. Instead of approaching them, we took a table in the center of the dining room, laughing and chatting animatedly with a group of travelers we had befriended. Specifically, two couples who, by a stroke of luck, happened to be in Gideon's industry. "Michael and Sabine are from Westbrook Partners," I mentioned casually as we walked past their table later, waving to our new friends. "Apparently, they have been trying to reach your firm about that big merger proposal. What a coincidence to find them here." Gideon's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Westbrook Partners was a massive potential client his company had been courting for months. Here he was, on a business conference, sitting next to his mistress while they were just feet away. "We are having drinks with them later," Cashin added pleasantly. "You should join us. I am sure they would love to hear all about your professional commitments." They offered no reply, but the message was received. Their private affair was bleeding into their professional lives with serious consequences. By midday, we had executed the next phase. When they arrived at the ship's spa for their scheduled couples massage, they discovered their appointment had been accidentally changed to separate sessions in different treatment rooms. Meanwhile, Cashin and I were enjoying their original time slot, having befriended the spa manager with a generous tip and a plausible story about our own anniversary celebration. The small disruptions continued throughout the day. Their lunch reservation was mysteriously canceled. The shore excursion they tried to switch to was suddenly overbooked. Their special requests to their room steward were somehow lost in the system. Nothing so overt as to scream sabotage, just a constant, frustrating stream of inconveniences designed to unravel their romantic escape. The true turning point, however, came that evening. The ship's nightly entertainment featured a passenger talent show, followed by a dance competition. Cashin and I had signed up. We had also entered Gideon and Mari's names without their knowledge. "And for our next contestants," the cruise director announced to the packed lounge, "let's give a warm welcome to two people celebrating a very special occasion. Please welcome Gideon and Mari's." A spotlight swung over to their table, pinning them in its beam. They sat frozen, expressions of pure horror dawning on their faces as their names were called. The audience applauded enthusiastically. "We hear they are celebrating a special relationship anniversary," the director continued, reading from the note card I had provided him. 18 months of romantic bliss. Although I am also hearing congratulations are in order for Mari's engagement. Wait, that cannot be right." Gideon and Mari's remained glued to their seats, mortified, as confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Perhaps they are feeling a bit shy," Cashin called out from our table. "Maybe they would feel more comfortable if we showed everyone some photos of their celebration first." Before they could react, the large screen behind the stage flickered to life. It displayed a slideshow of the security camera photos from their past cruises, intercut with screenshots of texts between them discussing their secret rendezvous. I had carefully edited everything to be incriminating, but not legally actionable, leaving just enough for the audience to connect the dots. "That is not, we did not authorize," Gideon sputtered, finally finding his voice and stumbling to his feet. "Oh, just one more special photo," I said, signaling to the AV technician I had also befriended. The screen changed to an image of Mari's public engagement announcement, featuring her beaming face next to Cashin's, the large diamond ring prominent on her finger. The date stamp was unmistakable, 6 months into her affair with my husband. A hush fell over the audience as the reality of the situation sank in. Then came the whispers, the sideways glances, the palpable judgment. They had sought the anonymity of cruises to conduct their affair, a place where no one knew them. Now their secrets were being laid bare for all to see. "I believe that is our cue," Cashin said, standing and offering me his hand. "We should show them how it is done." We took to the dance floor for the competition, performing a dramatic tango we had practiced during our week of planning. Every sharp turn and dramatic dip was executed with precision, our eyes locked in a performance of passionate solidarity that earned a thunderous ovation. When we finished, I saw Gideon and Mari's scurrying out of the lounge, heads bowed, unable to face the room full of strangers who were now privy to their sordid little secret. We watched from a distance as they argued on a deserted section of the deck. Their body language told the whole story: accusations, denials, and recriminations. "They are imploding," Cashin observed quietly. "Good," I said, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. "But we are not done yet." That night, we deployed the final part of our ship-based plan. While they were reeling from the public humiliation, I arranged for the ship's photography service to deliver a special package to their cabin, a commemorative photo album. Inside were professionally taken photos from the cruise, candid shots of them arguing, their tense body language, their obvious misery, with Cashin and me smiling happily in the background of frame after frame. The photographers had been well compensated for their covert work. The title of the album was embossed in elegant gold script: "When Truth Comes to Light, a Journey of Discovery." We watched from down the hall as a steward slipped the album under their door. I caught a glimpse of Gideon's face as he opened it. The dawning horror, the slow slide into utter defeat. But the true masterstroke came the next morning, as the ship prepared to dock at our final port of call. Cashin and I had arranged for a special announcement over the ship's PA system. "Attention passengers. Would Gideon and Maurice please report to the purser's office regarding an urgent matter with your disembarkation documents?" When they arrived, looking visibly nervous, they found not just the purser, but also a representative from the cruise line's corporate office, who just happened to be on board, another fortunate connection we had cultivated. "Mr. Gideon, Ms. Maurice," the corporate representative said formally. "It has come to our attention that you may have utilized fraudulent information when booking this and previous cruises." Gideon frowned. "What are you talking about? Your booking records indicate this trip was reserved through your company as a business expense, with tax documentation filed accordingly. However, the nature of your activities on board appears to be personal, not professional." Maurice went pale. "That is not, we did not. Furthermore," the representative continued, "there is the matter of company credit cards being used for non-business-related expenses, which has been flagged by your company's compliance department." Cashin and I watched from a discreet distance as Gideon's professional life began to unravel in real time. The evidence we had collected, including email chains I had anonymously forwarded to his company's ethics hotline, had triggered a full-scale internal investigation. At the same time, Maurice received her own devastating news. Her access to the startup's financial accounts had been frozen, pending an audit demanded by the investors. Cashin had moved swiftly, and her financial deceptions were now under a microscope. As they stood there, their carefully constructed parallel lives collapsing around them, I felt a strange sense of equilibrium. Not joy, not exactly vindication, but a profound sense of rightness. "This was never just about the cheating," I said quietly to Cashin as we observed the fallout. "It was about the calculation, the premeditation, the years of lies." He nodded. "They thought they were too smart to get caught, too arrogant to ever face a consequence." "Do you regret any of this?" I asked, suddenly curious about his feelings now that our plan was reaching its conclusion. Cashin considered it for a moment. "I regret trusting someone who did not deserve it. I regret not seeing the signs sooner. But this," he gestured toward the scene unfolding before us, "this I do not regret at all." When Gideon and Maurice finally emerged from the purser's office, their faces ashen with the knowledge that their actions had real-world consequences beyond a broken heart, I stepped directly into their path. "Did you enjoy the cruise?" I asked, my voice even and clear. My husband looked at me with new eyes, not with anger or defiance, but with something that looked a lot like fear. Fear of what else I knew, what else I might do. "This is just the beginning," I told him quietly. "When we dock tomorrow, you will find your belongings packed and waiting for you at a hotel. The locks on our house have been changed. The divorce papers are already with my lawyer, and every single member of our family and our social circle has received a detailed explanation of how and why our marriage is ending." I then turned to Maurice. "As for you, I do hope your wedding vendors offer refunds on your deposits. Cashin tells me he has been quite thorough in his communications with them." She flinched as if I had struck her. "The thing about betrayal," I said, addressing them both, "is that it reveals who people truly are. You both showed me exactly who you are. I'm just making sure everyone else sees it too." Cashin and I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there in the ruins of their own making. That night, our last on the ship, we had dinner at the captain's table, the reservation that was originally meant for Gideon and Maurice, but had been reassigned to us, thanks to the connections we had made. "To new beginnings," Cashin toasted, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his, feeling lighter than I had in years. "And to the truth, no matter how painful, it really does set you free." 6 months after that fateful cruise, I stood on a different kind of deck, this one belonging to my new waterfront condo. The ocean spread out before me, vast and uncertain, much like my own future. But for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty felt more like an exciting possibility than a source of fear. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed. Gideon, faced with the mountain of evidence I had compiled, and the professional humiliation that was now public knowledge, had not contested a single one of my demands. His affair had cost him far more than his marriage. The ethics investigation at his firm had resulted in a severe demotion and professional censure. The cruise line, after confirming the fraudulent use of his business expense claims, had also banned him from all future bookings. Mari's story had unraveled even more spectacularly. The financial irregularities Cashin had uncovered were just the tip of the iceberg. Once investors began scrutinizing their startup's books, they found a pattern of embezzlement that led to criminal charges. Her wedding, needless to say, was permanently off. The canceled vendor contracts and non-refundable deposits had become a significant financial burden, compounding her legal troubles. I sipped my morning coffee, watching the seagulls circle against a brilliant blue sky. A text message from Cashin came through. "Just landed. Are we still on for lunch?" Our relationship, forged in the crucible of mutual betrayal and retribution, had evolved into something unexpected since the cruise. It was not romantic, we were both too scarred for that, but it was something just as valuable, a deep and genuine friendship. We had supported each other through the aftermath, navigating divorce proceedings, legal hurdles, and the emotional turmoil of rebuilding our lives from scratch. He had recently relocated to open a new branch of his now thriving company in my coastal city, a business decision that conveniently coincided with my own post-divorce move. I texted back, "See you at the Pier restaurant at 1. As I got ready for lunch, I reflected on how far things had veered from the path either of us had envisioned when we stepped onto that cruise ship 6 months ago, consumed by rage and a thirst for vengeance. We had never expected to find strength, let alone a real connection, in the wreckage. The pier restaurant was busy when I arrived, but Cashin had saved our usual table on the terrace. He stood up when he saw me, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "The Tokyo deal closed this morning," he announced as I sat down. "The investors are thrilled." "Congratulations," I said, raising my water glass in a mock toast. "Not bad for a guy whose fiancé tried to sink his company." He laughed, a sound that came much more easily to him these months. "Speaking of sinking, have you heard anything new about our favorite couple?" I shook my head. "Not directly, but Elaine saw Gideon at a conference last month, said he's lost a lot of weight and looks haunted." Elaine, my former next-door neighbor, had been a steadfast source of support throughout the divorce. "Mari's plea deal was finalized," Cashin said. "Probation, restitution, and community service." Her parents had to mortgage their home to cover her legal fees. We exchanged these updates not with malice, but with the detached interest of people for whom the need for revenge had long since faded. The satisfaction had given way to something far more powerful: indifference. Our lunch arrived, and our conversation shifted to our own lives. My new consulting business, his plans for expansion, the upcoming charity gala we were both attending next weekend. "I have been meaning to ask you something," Cashin said, as we were finishing dessert. "That cruise line sent me a promotional email yesterday. Special offer on a Caribbean itinerary for the holidays." I raised an eyebrow. "Planning another revenge cruise so soon?" "Actually," he said, his expression turning serious, "I was thinking of reclaiming the experience. A trip with no hidden agendas, no elaborate schemes, just for enjoyment." "That sounds nice," I said, surprised by the suggestion. "Would you consider coming along, as friends?" he added quickly. "I just think we both deserve to have a cruise experience that is not built around someone else's betrayal." I considered his offer, this unexpected invitation to revisit the scene of our strange alliance. 6 months ago, the thought would have made me shudder. Now I found myself nodding. "I would like that," I said simply. As we walked along the waterfront after lunch, I realized a profound shift had occurred. The cruise that was meant to expose a betrayal had, in the end, revealed something else entirely: my own resilience. I had not only survived my husband's infidelity, but also the complete implosion of a future I had invested my entire adult life in. "You know," I said, as we paused to watch the sailboats bobbing in the harbor, "sometimes I almost want to thank them." Cashin looked at me, puzzled. "Thank them." "For what?" "For forcing me to become someone stronger than I ever knew I could be, for inadvertently introducing me to a true friend." I gestured between us. "Their betrayal was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but what came after? I would not change a thing." He nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I have had that same thought. If Mari's had not cheated, I would be married to someone willing to steal from our company and lie to my face every day. Instead, I am here, rebuilding something real." The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the water. And in that moment, I understood the most surprising outcome of all. True closure did not come from revenge, however satisfying it might have been. It came from using the rubble to build something new, something honest, something that was entirely my own. "Well," Cashin said, checking his watch, "I should get back for my conference call, but about that cruise, winter getaway, New Year's itinerary." I smiled, a feeling of lightness that had once seemed impossible. "New Year's sounds perfect. A fitting way to start the next chapter." As we said our goodbyes, I took one last look out at the ocean. It was the same ocean we had sailed on during that disastrous trip. The water that had carried us through a sea of betrayal now stretched out before me, an emblem of pure possibility. The horizon was open. The future was unwritten. And for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see what came next.